Hello, welcome back to another Ruby Inspire. This is Season 2, Episode 46. Pike hummed as he sat up on the bed, watching his parents help his big sister clean. He held his blanket in his lap, sucking on his pacifier. "How are you holding up, bud?" Lance sighs as he sat on the bed and scooted closer to him. The infant pecked up at his father with big, dark, greyish-bluish eyes, then buried his face into his blanket. With a squeal, Lance sighed and gently patted the boy's back. Keith smiled and shook his head. "At least he's warming up to you. A little bit. He lets you hold him for like a minute. Then he cries and reaches for you all over again." Lance huffed, kissing the top of Pike's head. Roslyn climbed up onto the bed. "I can't find my bedworm," she huffed, crawling into his lap. Lance hummed, rocking her back. "Well, we'll find him. Maybe you left him in the lounge." She shrugged and sat against his chest. Pike peered over his blanket and whined and held his arms out. Keith chuckled and picked up his son. "What is it, Pike?" Pike nuzzled into his chest, clutching Keith's shirt and with his own blanket tightly. "Pike, baby boy?" Keith sang, swaying him. Roslyn giggled. "Daddy, Pike's silly." "He's silly?" Lance gasped, and looking down at her as she twisted in looking up at him. "How is he silly?" "He's always making Mummy hold him," she squeaked, looking back and pointing at Pike. "Well, you always made me hold you when you were a baby," Lance muttered, bouncing her in his lap. She giggled more. "My hair, Daddy, my hair," Roslyn wagged, patting her head. Lance laughed. All right, I'll do your hair, little princess. Go and get me your brush and some hair ties." Roslyn nodded and scooted off his lap. She wiggled until she slipped off the edge of the bed and buried into the bathroom. She hurried out a minute later with her brush and her hair ties. Keith helped her back onto the bed, holding Pike with one arm. Roslyn crawled back onto Lance, sitting in front of him on a pillow he placed there for her. Lance hummed, taking the brush and 2 hair ties. She started brushing her hair. Then he grabbed the brush for her, pulling it all back into his hand. The toddler hummed softly, playing with the hem of the bright pink and blue dress. Keith watched fondly as Lance connected fully on the braid, her lovely raven hair. Keith cuddled his fingers, stretching them through Pike's dark curls, chestnut hair. Pike rubbed his nose into Keith's shoulder, sniffing. He relaxed, gently patting his mother's chest. "Yes, baby boy?" Keith hummed, returning to sway in circles. Pike cooed in response. Keith moved around the bed and sat beside Lance. He shifted until he was comfortable and leaning on his shoulder. Lance rested his cheek on Keith's head as he finished off the double French braids. "Ah, my beautiful princess," Lance sang, lifting her up and sitting her on the bowl of his lap. She squealed and giggled, laughing loudly as his arms wrapped around her, squeezing. "Dada," Roslyn gasped, grabbing his arms and squeezing as tightly as she could. Lance kissed the top of her head and leaned back to kiss Keith. He began to hum soft tune, swaying slightly. Roslyn laid back on him, reaching over to take Keith's hand. Keith gently squeezed, adjusting Pike to lay on his arm. Keith sighed, closing his eyes. "Lance?" "Yes, beautiful," Lance muttered, tilting his head to press his lips to Keith's forehead. "I want," he stated, shifting slightly, nervously. "I want to get married." Lance nodded, then paused. He pulled back slowly after a moment, looking into Keith's dark, slightly purplish eyes. For a moment, looking into him properly. "Married?" he echoed, and Keith nodded. "You want to get married?" "Yeah." Keith lay Pike down on the pillows behind them. The infant finally was asleep. "I mean, I know I'm not, well, it's been a while, but I wanted to get married. We're practically married already. It's just not official, I guess." Lance smiled softly, shoulders relaxing. "Oh, Keith." Lance leaned closer, resting his forehead against Keith's as Lance moved closer more. "Keith, me more, my Carino." Keith smiled, closing his eyes. Their lips met softly. "Whatever you want, okay?" Keith nodded, hummed happily. Roslyn sat in the lounge with Berry, Arena and Pike. Matthew was doing a mission for the freedom fighters, and Keith had to pilot Red Lion, so they asked Arena if she could stay with the children in case Lotor attacked. Arena, of course, said that she will, without asking Corvon. The Blade leader was pretty annoyed with her behaviour, but allowed her to stay anyway. Pike sat in her lap, stormy blue greyish eyes on Roslyn as she played with Berry. He clutched his favourite blanket to his chest, his pacifier loosely in his gums. Arena had her hands on both of his sides, keeping him up for support. "You're going to speak soon, cub?" Arena sang, leaning over to look down at him. Pike tilted his head to look up at her, then sucked on his pacifier and returned watching his sister. Arena smiled and kissed his chubby cheeks. He whined and rubbed where she had kissed. Berry leapt up onto the sofa. Roslyn pulled herself up after. Berry meowed, tail flicking side to side. Arena reached over and helped Roslyn up. "Oh, you two are just so precious," she sighed and smiled. "I wish I could have been there for my own cub." She carried her fingers through Roslyn's soft raven locks. The toddler's eyes sparkled as she giggled. Arena lifted and turned Pike to lay him against her chest. He whined and wriggled for a moment, then relaxed and gripped his blanket. I'm so glad he stayed for his two darlings, little cubs. Alright, that's the end of that. I hope you enjoy. Until the next time. Bye.